Ribeye. Cut from the rib section of the cow, between ribs 6 and 12, this steak is known for its exceptional marbling. Thin threads of fat run through the meat and melt during cooking, giving it a rich, buttery flavor. The fat doesn't just add taste, it also acts as a natural buffer against overcooking, keeping the interior moist even when the outside develops a deep, caramelized crust. It can come bone-in or boneless, and both versions cook well over high heat. The bone-in version is sometimes called a cowboy ribeye, and when the full length of the rib bone is left intact, often extending 12 inches or more, it becomes what's known as a tomahawk steak. That long bone serves no culinary purpose, but it makes for a dramatic presentation. Because of its fat content, ribeye stays juicy even if cooked slightly past medium, which makes it forgiving for home cooks. It's best seared over very high heat to get a proper crust, then finished with butter, garlic, and herbs if cooking in a pan. New York strip. This cut comes from the short loin, a section that sits behind the ribs and doesn't do much physical work during the animal's life. Less movement means more tenderness, and the strip reflects that clearly. It has a firm texture with moderate marbling and a defined fat cap along one edge, which you can trim or leave depending on preference. Leaving it on adds flavor as it renders during cooking. Compared to the ribeye, it has a slightly leaner profile but still delivers a full, assertive beef flavor that many people consider the most classically satisfying of all steaks. It's one of the most consistently ordered steaks in restaurants because it balances tenderness and texture without being too soft or too fatty. A well-cooked strip has a slight chew to it, not tough, but with enough resistance to feel substantial. It holds its shape well under heat, which makes it reliable whether you're cooking on a cast iron pan, a grill, or under a broiler. Filet Mignon. This is the most tender cut you can buy, taken from the tapered end of the tenderloin, a long muscle that runs along the spine and almost never engages during the animal's movement. That near-total inactivity produces meat with almost no connective tissue and a texture that cuts like butter. The trade-off is flavor. It's noticeably mild compared to fattier cuts, and some steak enthusiasts actually prefer other options on that basis alone. Chefs often wrap it in bacon or pair it with rich sauces like béarnaise or red wine reductions to add the depth the meat doesn't naturally carry. It's small in size relative to other steaks, which partly explains the higher price alongside the tenderness. The center of the tenderloin produces what are known as tournedos or chateaubriand when cut thicker, and these have appeared on fine dining menus for well over a century. It responds best to quick, high-heat cooking, searing the outside while keeping the center pink, and because there's so little fat, it can dry out quickly if overcooked. T-bone. The T-bone gets its name from the T-shaped bone that runs down the center of the steak, and understanding the anatomy makes it easier to appreciate what you're eating. On one side of that bone is a section of strip steak, and on the other is a smaller piece of tenderloin. You're essentially getting two different textures and flavor profiles in a single cut, which is part of its lasting appeal. The strip side offers a firmer, beefier bite with more fat, while the tenderloin side is softer and more delicate. It comes from the short loin, cut from the front portion of that section where the tenderloin is still relatively narrow. Cooking a T-bone requires some attention because the bone affects how heat travels through the meat, and the two different muscles can cook at slightly different rates. Grilling over direct flame is the traditional approach, and most cooks aim for medium rare to respect both sides of the steak equally. Porterhouse. The porterhouse is closely related to the T-bone and comes from the same general area of the animal, but it's cut from further back in the short loin where the tenderloin has grown wider and more developed. This means the tenderloin portion is significantly larger than what you'd find on a T-bone. In the United States, a steak must have a tenderloin section at least 1¼ inches wide at its widest point to legally carry the porterhouse name. That distinction matters more than it might seem, because the larger tenderloin changes the balance of the eating experience considerably. It's a large, substantial steak that is often shared between two people in restaurants, served on a wooden board and sliced at the table. The porterhouse has a long association with American steakhouse culture and was particularly fashionable in 19th-century dining establishments in New York City, where chophouses built their reputations around it. Cooking it evenly requires some skill, and many chefs position the tenderloin side away from the direct heat source to prevent it from overcooking before the strip side is done. Sirloin. The sirloin sits behind the short loin and is divided into two main sections, the top sirloin and the bottom sirloin. Top sirloin is the more desirable of the two, offering decent tenderness and a solid, honest beef flavor at a more accessible price than premium cuts. It doesn't have the marbling of a ribeye or the softness of a fillet, but it holds its own on a grill and is forgiving across a range of cooking methods. Bottom sirloin is tougher and generally used for roasts, stir-fry strips, or ground beef rather than individual steaks. The sirloin as a whole has a long and somewhat colorful history. A popular story holds that an English king was so impressed with a loin of beef that he ceremonially knighted it, producing the name sirloin. Most food historians dismiss this as folklore, but the story has circulated for centuries and attached itself to multiple monarchs depending on who's telling it. Today, the top sirloin remains a staple cut in casual steakhouses and home kitchens, valued for being reliably good without requiring a premium price.
Flat iron.
The flat iron comes from the chuck, specifically from the shoulder area of the cow, which is a section more often associated with tough braising cuts than with steaks you'd cook quickly over high heat. The muscle it comes from, the top blade, was long considered too problematic to sell as a steak because a thick, inedible seam of connective tissue ran directly through its center. Researchers at the University of Nebraska and the University of Florida identified a way to remove the tissue entirely and separate the muscle into two clean, usable pieces, and the flat iron steak was effectively born in the early 2000s as a result of that research. The outcome surprised a lot of people in the industry. Despite coming from the shoulder, the flat iron turned out to be the second most tender cut on the entire animal after the tenderloin. It has good marbling, a rich and slightly sweet beef flavor, and a smooth texture that responds well to high heat cooking. It's become a popular choice in restaurants as an affordable alternative to more expensive steaks, and it performs particularly well when marinated briefly before grilling.
Flank steak.
This cut comes from the abdominal muscles of the cow, located below the loin and sirloin along the underside of the animal. It's a lean, flat piece of meat with long, clearly visible muscle fibers running along its length, and those fibers tell you everything you need to know about how to cook and slice it. Because it comes from a hard-working muscle group, it has very little fat and can become quite chewy if not handled with care. The standard approach is to marinate it for several hours. Acids like citrus juice or vinegar help break down the fibers. Then you cook it quickly over very high heat and slice it thinly and deliberately against the grain. Cutting with the grain rather than against it is one of the most common mistakes people make with flank, and the difference in texture is immediately noticeable. Done right, it has a deep, intense beef flavor that richer cuts sometimes lack. It's widely used in fajitas, Korean bulgogi, Vietnamese pho preparations, and stir-fry dishes precisely because that bold flavor holds up well against strong seasonings and marinades.
Skirt steak.
The skirt comes from the plate section, just below the ribs, and is closely related to the flank in terms of how it looks, how it behaves, and how it should be cooked. There are two types, the outside skirt and the inside skirt, with the outside being more tender, more flavorful, and more sought after. It often ends up in commercial food service before it reaches retail butchers, which is why the outside skirt can be harder to find in grocery stores. The inside skirt is more commonly available and still perfectly good when treated correctly. Skirt steak has an even more pronounced grain than the flank and a looser, more open texture that makes it exceptionally good at absorbing marinades. It's the traditional cut used in authentic Tex-Mex fajitas. The word fajita itself comes from the Spanish word for strip or belt, a reference to this cut's long, narrow shape. Like the flank, it must be sliced against the grain after cooking, and it's best served no further than medium to keep it from toughening.
Hanger steak.
The hanger comes from the plate section as well, tucked between the rib and the loin in a position where it literally hangs, supporting the diaphragm rather than being attached to any bone, which is exactly where its name originates. There is only one hanger steak per animal, and it runs along a central membrane that must be removed before cooking, which adds a step that not all butchers bother with. That limited yield contributes to its inconsistent availability in stores. It has a strong, deeply savory flavor with a slightly coarse grain and a mineral quality that some describe as almost liver-like, in the best possible sense for those who appreciate it. In French bistro cooking it's known as omelette and has appeared on menus there for generations, long before it became fashionable elsewhere. American butchers traditionally kept this cut for themselves rather than putting it in the display case, which is why it earned the nickname butcher's steak.
It's best cooked over high heat to medium rare at most, and resting it before slicing makes a noticeable difference.
Chuck eye steak. This cut sits immediately adjacent to the ribeye on the carcass, coming from the 5th rib rather than the 6th through 12th where ribeye steaks are cut.
Because of that direct proximity, it shares much of the same fat distribution, muscle structure, and general eating quality.
The marbling is generous, the flavor is rich and pronounced, and the overall experience sits comfortably close to what you'd expect from a ribeye. The difference is that the muscle begins to change here, transitioning into the tougher chuck territory, which can create a slightly less uniform texture in some parts of the steak. A thread of connective tissue sometimes runs through the center and benefits from a brief marinade or simply from being trimmed before cooking. It's often called the poor man's ribeye, and the nickname is well earned given how closely the flavor compares at a meaningfully lower price. Only 2 or 3 chuck eye steaks can be cut from each side of beef, which keeps them from being widely available but makes finding them feel like a small discovery.
Denver steak.
The Denver steak is a relatively modern cut, identified and formally named in the early 2000s as part of a beef industry research initiative specifically designed to find underutilized muscles that could be sold as individual steaks rather than roasts or stew meat. It comes from deep within the chuck, harvested from a muscle called the serratus ventralis that lies beneath the shoulder blade. Despite belonging to the chuck, which is generally associated with tougher, more labor-intensive cooking, this particular muscle does very little work during the animal's life and yields surprisingly tender, well-marbled meat as a result. The flavor is rich and satisfying, sitting in the same general territory as a ribeye though with its own distinct character. It requires some skill to fabricate properly because of its position in the carcass, which is part of why it took so long to be recognized as a standalone steak. Because mainstream awareness is still catching up to it, Denver steaks are often priced more favorably than their quality would seem to justify. They cook well over direct heat and benefit from resting before slicing.
Picanha.
This cut is the undisputed centerpiece of Brazilian churrasco, the tradition of cooking meat over open fire that is deeply embedded in the culture of southern Brazil. It has been celebrated there for generations and only began gaining serious attention in North America and Europe relatively recently. The picanha comes from the top of the rump, sitting above the sirloin, and is defined by a thick, uniform cap of fat that covers one entire side of the meat.
That fat cap is not incidental. It's considered essential to the cut's identity and cooking method, and trimming it off is regarded as a fundamental mistake.
During cooking, the fat renders slowly and continuously bastes the meat beneath it, creating a self-basting effect that produces extraordinarily juicy results. In Brazil, it's traditionally cut into thick C-shaped slices, threaded onto curved metal skewers, and cooked over charcoal fire before being carved tableside in thin, descending passes. The meat itself is moderately tender with a clean, direct beef flavor that the rendered fat cap enriches without overwhelming.
Tri-tip.
The tri-tip is a triangular muscle from the bottom sirloin and carries a particularly strong regional identity tied to California's Central Coast, where Santa Maria-style barbecue built an entire culinary tradition around it beginning in the mid-20th century. For decades it was an obscure cut outside of that region, more commonly ground into hamburger or trimmed into smaller pieces than cooked and served whole. As Santa Maria barbecue culture spread and food media started paying attention, the tri-tip followed, and it gradually earned recognition across the rest of the country. It has good fat content for a sirloin area cut, a bold and satisfying beef flavor, and a firm texture that rewards low and slow cooking followed by a high heat sear, or simply grilling over oak wood in the traditional California style. One interesting quirk is that the grain direction shifts as you move across the steak, meaning a single straight slice won't be against the grain for the entire piece. Experienced cooks often cut the tri-tip in half where the grain changes direction and slice each portion separately to account for this.
Round steak.
The round comes from the rear leg of the animal, one of the most continuously and heavily worked muscle groups on the steer. That constant use makes it quite lean, dense, and noticeably tougher than cuts from the more relaxed loin and rib sections. It's divided into several subcuts: the top round, bottom round, eye of round, and sirloin tip, sometimes called the knuckle, with the top round being the most tender of the group, though that's relative within a generally firm category. Eye of round is the leanest and most uniform in shape, which makes it popular for deli-style roast beef, but it can become unpleasantly dry if overcooked. Round steaks are generally better suited to slow, moist cooking methods like braising, pot roasting, or simmering in liquid than to the dry, high-heat approach that works for loin and rib cuts. They've been a budget staple in home kitchens for generations, particularly during periods when economical cuts were a necessity rather than a choice. Marinating for an extended period, slicing very thin, or cooking low and slow in a covered pot are the most reliable paths to a satisfying result.